Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Ni hao. Buenos dias. Buenas tardes. Noche. Akwaba. Document. What up, though? This is Café Mélangé. Week 7, I think. Week 7. Oh, session número 2. Sin session número 1 esta semana. Holiday. So I'm still getting set up here. New growth and all. And I actually got about 10 minutes at this joint. A wee bit late today. So I consider a number of topics to like cover today. There's a lot that can be said. But for whatever reason, in the past hour, I think about sharing this idea. I try to be constructive, and when I am critical or judgmental, I strive for it to be purposeful and constructive even then. I don't know where the mic is going. The mic is on freeze. Crikey. I'm going to have to resort to, it seems to be doing on the report. I don't have the memory. Oh, the storage issues. Aha. Well, we're just going to have to trust this one, I guess. No, we got it. We got it. So I'm going to record these joints. Uh-oh. That's not it. It's not recording. Oh, that's tricky. The audio is on. So that's what's important for the moment. So that's done. We're back to that. We got this and all. We got the grease, the ashy fingers. Yeah. And even got some of that there. Where is it? There it is. Oh, look at that. Scar. Anyways, topic for today: Mélangé beef. Now this one is actually kind of a unaddressed topic because it's kind of next level type consideration within the experience of Mélangé. This is what I've observed in the Mélangé experience. Again, this is what I've observed in the Mélangé experience. Somebody finds out. Somebody experiences it without being aware of it, or without having the vocabulary and the concepts, and additionally to like the legitimization in actually proclaiming being Mélangé. So it's a very individualistic experience, or one that's very individualistic to one's family, one's siblings, maybe some cousins or something. Then one finds out about other people being mixed, and it actually is a thing, and people identify this, so it becomes a collective thing. And then there's combo about it. There's gripes and like shared angst and this, that, and the other. But that next level abstains from getting very in depth and substantive in terms of self awareness, self knowledge, spiritual knowledge, esoteric, ancestral knowledge, and additionally, and often, so there's just that awakening to being mixed, and all the different types of mix there are. This and additionally, then there's kind of like a regression towards vibing with those who have the same mix as oneself, and recognizing like the shared experience along those lines, and even certain shared interests, shared guidance, shared cultural norms and practices, shared priorities and agenda, socioeconomic aspirations and protocols, politics, economics, and additionally, so relationship and additionally. So, and I think that's where a lot of the mixed or the Mélangé activism and community building kind of, much of it kind of up to this point reaches and in some ways stalls or kind of pauses, because at some point the identity the identity politics, the identity discussion, discourse, and philosophizing, and commiserating, or whatever one wants to call it. And we got to get beyond that. Eventually, it has to become practical. And we gotta. How's this giving me a job? How is this giving me food on the table? How is this supporting my children? And additionally, and so again, we then we're in the nascent stage in terms of institutional development in our diaspora, in our global diaspora. So it's difficult to readily secure jobs and networks, additionally specifically about being mixed. So it's a matter of resorting towards uh, utilizing connections and affiliations within established communities, ethnic, religious, and otherwise, secular and otherwise. So, anyways, that's kind of like the, the sequence that I observe for the most part. Obviously, there are different ways of there are exceptions and other ways of doing it, but that's what I find to be a main thing in terms of people's kind of Mélangé kind of progression to this point. So, in that third-ish stage of kind of pulling back and settling within one's own, it may just be a matter of like a few friends. It may be a community that's established, but it tends to be along the same lines of the same kind of ethnic mix, and with the similar politics, with a similar socioeconomic experience and aspirations and protocols, and additionally. And so, in terms of pan Mélangé solidarity and community building, there's a certain hesitancy in committing towards that, because what is that? And in that regression, there's specificity. There are different types of mixes. So what I am addressing in this session today is Mélangé beef. And beef is a term that's utilized to describe disagreement, conflict, aggression, and otherwise. So that's like the topic for today as I get 10 minutes into this joint doing it. So the subtext or the subtitle for the theme is the fission and diffusion. So the fission meaning like the things that are popping off, and then diffusion, the things that set it calm. So to be honest, as I describe what I mean by the beef, the Mélangé beef, there ain't too much beef. To be honest, ain't too much hostilities between Mélangé people, because again, it's a very nascent experience in a collective sense. And in an institutional sense. So for there to be like entrenched beefs and aggressions, ain't too much of that between Mélangé people. But this is what I'll describe in terms of like maybe it's not even competition. It's not even. I'll explain why all this is. I'm like going back on the motivation of the theme, but it's a little bit of a sensationalization, the title, but it's appropriate to like see it. And I'll explain why it's undone eventually, but God willing. But what I mean by beef is basically difference of interests and difference of priorities that become increasingly exaggerated or divisive because of the different alignments and allegiances that Mélangé brethren progress within. So I'll give some examples. I'll start with like what might be increasingly proximate with myself. We can talk about Creole, people who are mixed with African and European ancestry predominantly. There is a certain politics alignment, typically with liberal, Eurocentric Westerners who are accepting of people who are different, and particularly within the United States and Western society who accepts or who employs like affirmative action policies. There is a certain institutional infrastructure. There's a network. There are networks. There are institutions. There are standards and protocols that provide people who are Creole, mixed with African and European, either first generation, second generation, multi generation, that provide certain economic, political, social, religious, spiritual favoritism um, uh, through such allegiances. Yet again, though, it is predicated upon alignment with Eurocentric interests and Eurocentric policy, particularly liberal Eurocentric policy. Um, so there's that. There's also conservative alignment with conservative Eurocentric policy, but it seems to be less prevalent, at least within the United States and probably Canada and the Western, this part of the Northwestern Quad. So along those lines, there's certain interests. People, there's a certain influence and antagonism or uh, discouragement for alignment with policies that are against foreigners, and particularly foreigners from the East, to be honest. And we can look at the wars that have been fought in the past 50 years, past 100 years, and the people who are on the front lines of those, and the political, military alignments that are imposed and adopted along those lines. And I don't mean to be, I don't make it mean inappropriate innuendo with that. But like I said, Eurocentric mainstream interests have certain competitions globally and employ certain communities or attempt employing certain communities to be aligned to help in that competition. And so that includes people who are Creole in this hemisphere, particularly in the Northwest Quad, U.S. and Canada. So when aligning in such a manner, even people who are Mélangé, when kind of reverting back to that kind of to that support base, those are some of the intrinsic or overarching influences and discouragements and impositions that are affiliated with that. We can look at Métis. We can look at. I know I can speak less about mestizo intrinsically, intuitively, because that's less of my experience. So I'll talk about Métis and mixed native people. Now, Métis is a word that's utilized particularly in Canada. It's French, Francais, mixed natives. On this land, there are a number of different terms that are utilized, but there's an absence of an organized community like there is in Canada or in north of where I am in Ohio. Métis is an interesting phenomenon because obviously being native, there's an intrinsic legitimacy of being on this land. But then there's also the experience of being a settler and coming from both of those heritages and claiming both of those heritages. And so in some ways, how you doing? All right. In some ways, I'll be honest, like when I look at, first of all, I'm going to say, to be honest, I say give all the land back to native brethren and make arrangements for settlers to continue to reside according to native terms. And that includes providing native land appropriately to Métis as well. So I love and peace to the Métis, and there's a lot that the Métis National Council has to share in terms of sovereignty and organization and development as Mélangé people, to be recognized politically and communally as a distinct cultural, ethnic heritage and people. So love, respect, and peace. That being said, one of the things that I just observe and a concern that I have just because of my experience in dealing with multiculturalism additionally. When I see a lot of the Métis kind of promotional materials, intra-Métis promotional, meaning to like encourage the Métis to get on board and be active in the community, and promoting Métis culture and customs and practices. To be honest, when I look at the photographs that are utilized, I'm seeing a lot of people who are just very, very Eurocentric in the phenotype, and it has an appearance from an American perspective, an American experience. I ain't American, but I come from that experience. from an American experience. It has the appearance of settlers appropriating native culture and having this semi-native medium to do that. And so it's somewhat of a pause and like a certain challenge when observing. Now that being said, recognizing that there are Métis who have that and who are legit for generations deep in the culture. So it is recognizing that what Métis is and recognizing its legitimacy in and of itself, and that includes having certain Eurocentric tendencies, Eurocentric phenotypes, and additionally. Um, so, anyways, along those lines, one of the concerns is again alignment with Eurocentric mainstream, and less so with Métis, but increasingly south in the U.S. and um, in this part of the Northwest Quad. Um, there's a certain there's a certain economic allegiance um, that that is increasingly specific and the words exclusionary and divisive come to mind, and that's a little bit strong, but it's along those lines that facilitates or that causes a certain separation between other ethnic communities, and including within the Mélangé, just the interest. Because in my experience, people who are mixed native here in the States kind of either claim native completely or thoroughly, or progress in a Western context with a native awareness and a certain native affiliation or a native affinity. So, how you doing? All right, how you doing, bro? All right. So that's my observation. Modest amount of experience, and I'm included within that myself. Um, so one other group I'll say, because I'm getting a bit long and I gotta go. One other group I'll mention in this joint is Hapa, and so Hapa is probably the predominant type of Mélangé. Um, uh, can we say subgroup, or I'm uncertain what term to utilize in terms of category of Mélangé, but probably the strongest, the most vocal element, and the most organized. I've said this before, and organizationally very strong in the leadership and in starting organizations, starting initiatives, building communities in the U.S., but also internationally, and also increasingly internationally connected, maintaining roots and relationships with brethren from the respective Asian diaspora, and traveling, visiting, knowing culture, maintaining language, and additionally. And so, Hapa community is very formidable in the Mélangé experience, particularly here in the West, particularly here in the Western Hemisphere and Northwest Quad. And so, there's a lot to be admired about that. Now, simultaneously, when we talk about Mélangé beef, the competition or the difference of interest, there's consideration that one, recognizing Hapa existing within a further context of excuse me, existing within a further context of Euro-Asian interaction, and particularly within Western society, Asian, particularly East Asian brethren, being perceived as the model minority, as being preferable and perhaps less conquerable than people of other ethnicities, i.e., African, Latino, Native, even perhaps Middle Eastern. And so that's specifically just for people who are exclusively Asian. So there's a consideration of Hapa being, oh, wait a minute, if Asian is the model minority, what? Hapa, that's even like 1.5 if Asian is the preferred minority in second class citizenship, then Hapa is like the 1.5 class citizenship, something along those lines. I'm being somewhat flippant, but with all due respect, I'm just giving the kind of like kind of flippantness of society. But that's the consideration, and so and then being provided with certain favoritism within Eurocentric mainstream within Western society, particularly here in the Northwest Quad. And also because many Hapa are still connected with lineages, relations in Asia. Additionally, oh wait a minute, it's not just giving them tokum jobs; they actually can do something with us too. So because of that, that means that Hapa have a keen interest in being Hapa, but perhaps less of an interest or motivation, pragmatically, for being Mélangé and identifying with the aggregate of people who are also Mélangé. How you doing, though? All right. And so when it comes time to when we talk about solidarity and standing, holding ranks and this and the other, there's less political, social, economic motivation for Hapa to like be aligned with Mélangé because well, hold up, hey, what do we get for it? What's the benefit for us? And that's not a slight. That's just a matter of fact. So those are some considerations. Now, obviously, there are all different types of mixes. Like I said, Mediterranean, South Asian, um, Mediterranean, Israeli Mediterranean, Arab. There's all types of European mixes, and additionally, so within each of these experiences, within the different contexts, depending within our different societies globally, um, there can be different motivations for Mélangé brethren based upon the ethnic affiliation that brethren respectively have. And so, in terms of identifying holistically as Mélangé and accepting all the shibboleth and baggage that comes with all the different ethnic communities and and affiliation with all the different ethnic communities. Many find it increasingly pragmatic and beneficial just to like claim the heritage that one experiences personally and maintain allegiances along those lines. So now here's the thing that undoes it. Here's the diffusion. To diffuse, but also to fuse. Um, to diffuse the beef and diffuse the relations. It is the fact that Mélangé ain't got no boundaries. So, somebody identifies as Hapa and identifying with the Eurasian experience. Guess what? Hapa also includes people who are Asian and African and Asian and Middle Eastern and Asian and Latino and additionally Asian and Latina and additionally. And so if one wants to claim that identity as Hapa and reap the benefits of that preferred model minority status and maintain heritage accordingly along those lines as Hapa, what is that? What is Hapa? Where are the lines drawn? And does one exclude one type of Hapa either directly, explicitly, or implicitly and subtly? Um, in order to abide by the imposed standards and protocols of the mainstream homogeneity. How much can that last? And how much is it increasingly beneficial to actually be inclusive of all the different types of mixes of Hapa? And the same thing for Creole and accepting the Blasians. And same thing with Métis and additionally. Um, the thing about Mélangé, intrinsically, intuitively, inherently, is that there are no boundaries. And in identifying as being mixed heritage and wanting to maintain that, particularly as a premise for maintaining relationships, honoring one's ancestry, and progressing in life, and just being oneself, honest to oneself, true to oneself. To do that, that also means, to some degree, embracing those who share the experience, but are also different, but are also different. And so that's what ultimately diffuses the beef and fuses the beat. Something that sounds like beef or beat. something like that in some language. So, anyways, that's the thing. So again, there still has to be some pragmatism with that. There still has to be tangibility. There has to be a certain regularity of activity, of customs, of rituals. Um, Language might be going a little bit distant at the moment, but along those lines, a certain vocabulary and even interlinguistic vocabulary. Um, so that's a consideration for us to hold as we. Oh, I got that third bell. As we progress in this experience of Mélangé, and we solve the pragmatic needs that we have in this life in terms of putting food on the table, shelter over our heads, schooling our children, and being comfortable, being happy. Being spiritual, religious, being prosperous, being righteous. So, anyways, those are some thoughts. I was a little bit rushed, so I didn't have it all together like what my ordinary like. However, there it is. And guess what? I'm done. It's it. That's for today. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, zajin, adios, taichi, faris, asan kupe, na asamu, kila love.